Well, Al Jazeera has been speaking to people across the Middle East about the impact of what happened in Tunisia. They told us what it meant for them and their countries.
The
revolution in Tunisia is considered the gateway to the Arab Spring. It laid the foundation to other revolutions in the Middle East and Arab world. It inspired peoples of the necessity to change, to rise and rid themselves of dictators who held the reins of power for a long time. It was then followed by the Egyptian Revolution, then us here in Yemen.
As you see, this is called Bouazizi tent. It was put up in Freedom Square here in Yemen in 2011 when the Yemeni revolution started. Named after Bouazizi, this is living proof that the Yemeni revolution was inspired by the Tunisian one. The slap on Bouazizi's face awakened the Arab peoples who have been reeling for decades under the brunt of dictatorship, regime, oppression, injustice and poverty. Bouaziz was just one of many oppressed Arab citizens. Arab Spring revolutions will continue, as the case here in Yemen.
The Tunisian revolution came as a shock to us, and it served as a dream to other Arab youth. We had not expected the Tunisian revolution to topple bin Ali within days. We then were overwhelmed with joy and delight. We had not even expected it would be a source of inspiration to us in Egypt.
The Arab Spring revolutions in general were very necessary because the Arab people were choking. The leader's real side was revealed. Everything was a lie on top of a lie. It was very important for revolutions to take place. First of all, so the Arabs can defend their honor and their freedom, and so that we are not marginalized. The consequence of Tunisia's revolution in regards to Syria, it did not have an effect. I think there is a difference. At the beginning of the revolution here in Syria, there was suppression from the army and police. In Syria, we are of course going to rise up. We are not going to wait for Tunisia. When the time is right, we rose up, thank God.
We're going to stay with that story for the next 4 or 5 minutes here on the News Hour. Joining us live is Randall Kuhn, an associate professor at the University of Denver in Colorado. He has written extensively on the role of human development in the Arab Spring. Randall Kuhn, I mean, as far as that event is concerned, surely the Arab Spring didn't succeed, it didn't fail, it's still ongoing.
I think that's exactly right. The processes that underlie the Arab Spring began 20, 30 years ago. Part of what I look at is the role of the very regimes that were overthrown in providing the kinds of things that regimes can provide. They're good at immunizations, they're good at basic health services, and as new generations of educated, healthy, empowered individuals came to expect more and more from government, good quality jobs, marriages that are modern and loving and respectful, and of course human rights and voice, these are things the governments couldn't deliver. And so we saw revolutions in 5 countries. We saw another 15 or so countries not have those revolutions. And now we're beginning to see these processes continue to unfold, particularly in countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Persian Gulf countries, along with countries like Jordan and Morocco.
Very difficult to get this in one answer, I know, but for you, half a decade on, what are the pluses and what are the minuses?
Oh, it is a hard question, especially speaking to you from the United States, where people, I think, have a very different opinion at this point than elsewhere. Obviously, the big minus is the chaos and misery in Syria. And that was obviously precipitated by the Arab Spring, though many other events had to unfold for the disaster in Syria to happen. And certainly the most immediate concern on everybody's minds should be, how can we get a settlement in Syria? Now that we see a settlement today in Libya that will hopefully stick, how can we get the parties together in Syria? The more hopeful aspect, though, is obviously the continued evolution of the government in Tunisia, some progress in Morocco, Jordan. We hear word of progress in Algeria, but the real important change on the horizon is what's still going on throughout the region. That the changes that we see, the rising expectations brought on, yes, that you can't separate the optimism that people have felt from improved human development from the disappointment that they feel on not finding the right jobs or the right marriages. That combination of things is incredibly potent. And so if you look in countries, so my recent work is looking in countries like Qatar and Kuwait and Bahrain. After the Arab Spring, after these governments gave massive subsidies and grants to their population, partly to ward off the revolution, what you saw was marriage rates, which had been plunging for years, suddenly rebounded, but only for a year or two. Now we see countries are right back on the trajectory of declining rates of marriage, declining fertility, rising age of marriage, people finding it harder and harder to put together a life that they want, and the government not being able to do anything to say, look, getting married later or not getting married at all is okay, or you know, not having everything that you want, that you were told you would get in life, that this is okay. The governments don't have this kind of room to maneuver, and yet they can't do anything to solve the problems.
You've hinted at what's happened in Egypt. You've touched on what's going on in Syria. I mean, the political microwave here is on full power. Do you get the sense that dictatorships of any hue, no matter how those dictators wrap themselves up in the flag of nationalism, those dictatorships never, ever last? So someone like Assad will ultimately fall as a consequence of a fruit seller in Tunis 5 years ago.
I think it's hard to say what's ever inevitable, but except perhaps the only thing that's inevitable is change. And the fact that Bouazizi has, that his actions created this kind of change, he was so emblematic of the struggles that people felt and of the sort of way people view this struggle, right? The early news on Bouazizi when all of this first happened was that he was a college graduate who was forced to sell fruit on the street. The real story was even more interesting, which is that he was a high school graduate selling fruit to help his sisters who were in college, right? That's the kind of real change that's going right, you know, change in gender roles, change in expectations. And so these processes, they take an enormous amount of time to unfold. Nothing's inevitable. Everything takes an incredibly long time when you're talking about individuals having an impact on change of this scale. But I remain hopeful.
Randall Kuhn, thank you so much.